and welcome to 60 minutes of unscripted .NET entertainment. As doctors of .NET, we prescribe healthy choices in .NET. I'm your host, Cam Soper, and I'm here with my co-host, David Pine.
Good morning, friends.
I'd like to welcome today's guest, Khalid Abuhakmeh. Khalid, please tell us about yourself and who you are and what you do.
First of all, thank you for having me. This is really exciting. So thank you guys. My name is Khalid Abuhakmeh, as Cam has said. I'm a JetBrains .NET developer advocate, mostly focusing on tools like ReSharper and JetBrains Writer, and some of the other .NET tools like .memory, .trace. But for the most part, I consider myself a web developer. So I mostly focus on, frameworks like ASP.NET Core. I also blog a lot about technology at KhalidAbuhakmeh.com. And I guess today is I'm going to show you my workflow as terms of how I write and some of the tools that I've kind of open source so that anyone interested in getting into blogging can kind of use it as a blueprint to kind of start their own adventure with writing. So that's generally it.
Awesome. So I'm guessing that this is not like Das Blog or WordPress or anything like that then.
No, it's going to be interesting. I know some folks are going to ask, why not use a content management system? There's just a lot of tools out there. First of all, for me, content management systems really just come with a lot of baggage, back-end databases, security models, usernames, passwords, all that kind of stuff. They have their advantages, but as kind of an individual blogger, I'm sure actually David works on the Docs team, right? So, that's the world's biggest static site, arguably, right? So,
Cam does too, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
I mean, work is a strong word.
But yeah, I mean, the Docs site is really amazing from a technical perspective. It's one of the world's largest static sites. And it just works. I mean, the other day I submitted a correction to the Docs site. You just get on GitHub and make a few corrections and you submit a PR. So for me, I just enjoy static sites a lot more, but I also understand that it's really a preference thing. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get into that a lot deeper here after the checkup. Let's get into that. So, my dear friend, Mr. Pine, what do you have for us?
So today we're going to actually be looking at an MS Learn learning path, and learning paths are a little bit different than modules. If you're unfamiliar with MS Learn, it's our platform for educating the world, in addition to the content that we build out with Docs. And they're a lot more interactive, and there's ways to kind of acknowledge the things that you've learned along the way. And as Khalid mentioned before, I work on Docs. Cam does actually a ton of work for MS Learn. He's been building modules for a very long time. So I tip my hat to him for that effort because it's huge. So with that, we're going to look at Azure static web apps. And there's lots of different modules within this learning path. So you can publish Angular or React or Svelte or even Vue, right? Those are some of the common JavaScript-based static web apps. And I did actually pull up the definition of static web page from Wiki because there was some rumblings recently on Twitter about the definition of static websites and what they are and how it's kind of an overloaded term. And there is a bit of flexibility and interpretation with that. So a static web app is really just anything that's delivered from a server, almost like a file system, if you will. So it's unaltered. It's not, there's not a request that comes in and then the server takes the request and interprets it and does some dynamic, anything like that. It's verbatims from the internet, so or from the web server rather. So you're getting just the raw HTML. Now, the distinction a lot of people are loosely interpreting is whether or not it should have JavaScript running, or if there's any HTTP calls thereafter. But really, that's what the essence of web pages are, right? It's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's, I mean, you interpret it the way you will. My interpretation is that as long as it's static HTML, it's a static.
Right. That it's scoped, that static, the definition of static web page by your definition is scoped just to the server's
delivery
involved
content. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So with that, one of the learning path modules that I found to be very interesting, right? So we looked at the JavaScript aspect. We looked at publishing an API to an Azure static web app. Obviously, there's authentication, which is amazing. But I wanted to focus primarily on Blazor. If you follow me on Twitter or you've seen any of the stuff recently, Blazor WebAssembly is something I hold near and dear to my heart. And WebAssembly basically enables client-side browsers to leverage binary. So you end up having compilation targets. So you can basically build out your C#, you target WebAssembly. WebAssembly is then understood, and then you don't have to worry about JavaScript, right? You don't have to worry about like Angular or React or any of those things. You get .NET for a development experience in your browser, which is, I think, profound and awesome. So with that, since we're delivering things to Azure static web apps with WebAssembly, there's this notion of .NET Web APIs. So one of the benefits of Blazor WebAssembly is that your client-side WebAssembly can share models that your Web API is pushing over the wire. So if you have that mental model in your head for years as an Angular developer and AngularJS and even dabbling with Vue and things like that, that's been one of the pain points. Even with the advent of TypeScript, where you have the ability to type out your models, it was still a tedious task to look at your different endpoints and say what's the shape that those things are returning, and then make sure that your model on the client side maps that. That entire concern is alleviated with this type of programming model. So we did share the link. Hopefully you'll dive into some of the MS Learn stuff, but it's very in depth. There's plenty of things that you can learn from it, and hopefully you enjoy it. And with that, I think
so wait.
Yeah.
I have a question before you throw to me. I have a question. So this module, this one that you scroll back up, so look at the summary for this module again. So this module shows me how to do a WebAssembly web app. So that's living in the client against a .NET API that apparently, looking at the objectives, lives in Azure Functions. So this is a completely serverless app that we're building here.
Yep.
Well, that's cool.
Super cool.
Okay, and I bet Khalid's going to tell us a lot more about super cool static web app things in the hallway track. So let's get to it. All right, Khalid.
Okay.
So you're going to tell us about your blog, which we've already established is not DOS blog. It's not it's not WordPress, and you've talked a lot about like the doc site being statically generated. So I'm going to guess that your blog is statically generated.
Yeah, about throughout my career, I've had several iterations of my blog. Actually, the first version was Mads Christensen's blogengine.net. That's a throwback. If there's ever been a throwback, so that was my very first blog. I think the blog was titled monstersgotmy.net, and it was like horror themed .net. It was doing pretty good at the time, but I kind of dropped off from there. My second blog was really a service. So instead of like having to manage my site, I ended up using a third-party service to write on. But I found that there was just a complete lack of control there for me. And then the current iteration of my blog actually uses Jekyll, which was developed at GitHub. There's much newer and cooler static site generators out there today. But I found that the Jekyll community is mature in terms of its offerings, plugins, and themes, things I don't really excel at, I could lean on that community. So today, I do use Jekyll, and that's kind of the foundation of the Frankenblogging project that I kind of put out there. So I'm a huge fan of static sites. I think it's a great approach for individuals and even teams. And as you folks have demonstrated at Microsoft, it even scales to the planet. So it's awesome. I love it.
Well, awesome. Show us show us some of your process. Show us some of how writing for your blog works.
Okay. So if David could share my screen, let me know when you have it.
Yep. What's up?
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. So I'm mostly a Mac OS developer. So I know this is kind of still pretty new. I think last time we saw on the Stack Overflow survey that 70% of developers still do .NET on Windows. But I'm a Mac OS person. So normally how I start is I'll go into my blog directory, and I've actually written a bunch of .NET commands that really help me out. So the first thing I'll do is I'll run my .NET run info.
Real quick, is that an alias then that you have there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I ever like am in a different directory, I can just say, oh, I want to write a blog today, and it'll just take me to my blog directory.
Love it. Can you zoom in a little bit on your terminal here?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm already in old person mode, which is 1920 by 1080, but I'll accommodate folks. It's fine. So I'll usually run .NET run info. Ooh, that doesn't look as nice. Here, I'll shrink it down just a little bit. And what this does is it just kind of shows me what today's date is, what my latest post that I've written. You can see I'm out almost into December at this point. And also the nearest post that I'm going to publish. So this week I'll be tweeting about simple redirects. So I'll be blogging about that.
Real quick, I just wanted to parse this. So the latest post, that's actually a post that you've written that you've yet to publish.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love when bloggers are so efficient that they've written things into the future. I started doing that for a while, and then my God, it was so hard to keep up with. But awesome, that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
So and I'm looking at the dates here. I guess you blog at like a weekly cadence. Is that?
Yeah. So this is kind of one of the features of Frankenblogging, which I've kind of made available to anybody who wants to blog this way. But yeah, like I pick the days that I essentially want content to be published on, whether it's a Tuesday, Thursday. So previously I was doing 2 blog posts a week on Tuesday and Thursday. But what I found from my personal experience is that the Thursday post would essentially undercut the momentum of my Tuesday posts. There's just so much content out there that even releasing 2 blog posts in a week would would essentially like stop my momentum and be counterproductive. So, but yeah, like you can, I'll show you the command. We can actually jump into C# code after walking through this, but you can kind of see how you could modify it for your own personal preference. So if you want to publish every Tuesday, every Friday, you can kind of tweak those things. The next line here, number of days away, this is kind of the way I like to think about it. Do you ever play a video game where you have to like run to the right of the screen while like a big ball chases you or a monster is about to like eat you?
Right.
This is what the number of days away is. So if this starts to get super low, I start to feel stressed, like, oh my God, I'm going to run out of content, right?
So we have a question real quick too. Don't just to interject real quick. A viewer on YouTube is asking, is this just for your blog, or can this be used for like even like a web application?
Yeah, so this is just a command, so you can like put anything you want in here. I'm not sure how familiar you folks are with like my Twitter account, but I also do like C# tweets with like images and stuff, and I've actually integrated that down here. So number of tips and the current tweet tip. So the way I cycle through those tweets is I use a modulus operator to figure out, where I am. Because this usually runs in GitHub Actions, like my promotion stuff. So yeah, you can put anything in here that you find useful. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Cool. So you could like use this as like a CMS kind of situation and less like blogging specifically.
Yeah, the way that I end up building out these commands. By the way, this is a Spectre console, which allows you to create these kind of like pretty outputs. But you could basically put any metric that you can pull out of your website into this approach. And the thing I like about this as well is since it's .NET, you can also run it in a GitHub action, and this will show up. Just like this in the output of your GitHub action. So that's kind of nice, especially if you're not near your machine and, excuse me, and one of your actions fails, or you just want to go see what the current build is, you can kind of go and look at this output there. So it's pretty neat. But yeah. So, and down here, I can see what my latest posts are. So anybody watching this right now can maybe beat me to the punch if they feel like taking some of these topics and writing about them. But yeah, that's generally it. Let me see here. So I'm actually using. Let's see. Oh. So usually, let's see if this works. Oh no, it doesn't. So usually I have other commands, and let me actually open up. So I use JetBrains Writer because I'm mostly on Mac OS, but we can jump into the commands here that are part of my Jekyll blog, and this one goes ahead and creates files. Here is the info command that we saw. You can kind of see here. I just have this settings class that grabs a bunch of settings. And then we just kind of output this grid to the console. So yeah, it's not like complex, but it's very powerful. One of my favorite commands. Oh, by the way, here's my promotion command. So anytime you see me really tweeting about content, spoiler, it's not really me. It's a robot. I've employed robots in my stead.
We knew that already. We had
run
the whole, verify that you're not a bot, and we had discovered that you're a bot. So.
Oh no, I thought the guise was perfect, but I guess the veil has been dropped. But yeah, so this way, this approach reads from an RSS feed. To be honest with you, I'm not really happy with having to make a web call, especially in a GitHub action. But then I just grab a post randomly and then I tweet about it. You'd be surprised too. It's like I've actually had other bloggers use this approach, this particular promotion approach. And they're always worried about the randomization of promotion. But what I found is, it sounds obvious when I say it, but what I found is not everybody's always watching your Twitter feed. And the way Twitter promotes your tweets to people who have subscribed to you or followed you, they may not always see that you've written any particular content. Mm-hmm. So randomization of promotion of your content actually works out pretty decently. So yeah.
So can you you're showing us the code for these commands. Can you maybe show us a little bit about your workflow and how, how like you go from, like what you write and how that ends up like posted somewhere on where do you host your where do you host your static websites for that matter?
So I actually host on Netlify. I just find that they have a pretty great deployment process. But I've also hosted static sites on Azure in the past, and that works pretty great too. It really depends on kind of what your team and you as an individual are comfortable doing. But I found as like an individual blogger, Netlify just kind of, it's free and it works. So, but yeah, that's where I host. So you asked what my particular workflow is. So let me up this. So this is we're in the Frankenblog directory, and usually what I'll do is I'll come in, like I said, I'll run DNR info, and I'll kind of see what's kind of happening, right? I'll get an idea of like potentially what I've done. I look through the latest posts. Funny story. Last week, I actually wrote a blog post and then did the dumb thing and searched through my backlog and then realized I'd already written a version of that blog. So yeah, don't be like me in that sense. But so I usually come in here, I do DNR info, and then we talked about commands, right? And for me, what's really important is creating some sort of schedule. David alluded to this. It's like trying to blog in the future. What I found is content, you want to write, maybe this is advice more than like a hard rule.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is I personally don't want to be a thought leader in the sense of like, I'm not here to tell you how to write software. The kind of blog posts I like to write help you overcome a particular problem that you're having. So in a sense, if you've run into this particular issue, that's likely why you're on my site and why you're reading the content. I'm not trying to push any particular philosophy or pattern or anything like that.
You're just trying to solve the problem.
Exactly. And what I found is those are actually end up being more popular than, say, like me trying to convince somebody of something. I don't know, like maybe other bloggers have success with that, but I personally haven't, had that success. But anyways, so I'll come in here, and scheduling is super important and like planning stuff out. So I have this command called new. So I'll say, I can give it a title. So I'll say .NET run. This is what this DNR is, by the way. It's just shorthand because I got tired of typing .NET run all the time. But I'll come in here, say DNR new. How about you guys give me a title for a blog post? What are you guys interested in?
Well, hanging out with the .NET docs.
Hanging out with the .NET docs. So I'll come in here and I'll create a post, right? And then you can see that it was created, the date that it was set on, and the actual post. So if I open up my editor, you can see that there's a markdown file ready to go. I can come in here and say.
So you're that was a template command that you ran earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if we look at it, it's actually not, again, none of this stuff is like earth shattering, but when you start to realize like you do this out of habit, these are the things that can kind of steal minutes and passion away from like actually writing. The point of Frankenblog and the reason I have these commands was really to get people straight into writing the content that they want to write. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. It's like, why didn't you use something like WordPress or another content management system? Markdown for me just focuses on the content and the writing. And when I can do that, I'm not futzing around with, should this be bold, or should this be a link, or should this look a certain way? I found Markdown kind of gets rid of all those decisions for me. So yeah. So here's the command, and you can see we create the file here, and then we go ahead and we just inject. We inject some of the metadata that we need. So here's the string builder. Can you folks see that? Okay. Should I up it?
You might up it just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's better.
So yeah, like once we create the file, we kind of know what the markdown layout should be, the title, the categories, if we have any. We also have pesky words. We, as the .NET community, suffer from having punctuation in our main product's name. So I'll usually try to clean that up as well. For my personal blog, I've actually updated this command, so I'll replace punctuation like .NET with words like .NET, or if it's ASP.NET, it'll actually get translated to ASP.NET.
Actually, I want to digress for just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That dot in the .NET, that is the biggest pain in the neck when it comes to autocorrect. Has anybody else noticed that, right? You want to type like .NET and then autocorrect is like, no. You're ending the sentence and starting a new sentence with the word net. And I'm like, no, that's not what I want.
Yeah, I don't know if you folks use tools like Grammarly. I know Word has a bunch of grammar correction built into it. Oh, man. It always, like, all those tools always think you're ending the sentence prematurely. It's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the other nice things about writing in Markdown, because Markdown normally doesn't do those kind of things. So, but yeah, so you come in here, you'll write, I'm talking to Cam and David. It's awesome. Yeah. Oh my God. See, this is why I need Grammarly, because I was about to make a terrible punctuation.
Or you're just starting to say .NET and you were gonna like.
.NET is great. So one of the other things I've built into here is if you're not a big Jekyll user, you might not know all the commands. So I've actually created the server for you. So you can just run .NET run server, and then so we can see the post.
That's awesome. I can only assume that you've already blogged about your blog setup.
It's interesting. I've talked about it. Sometimes I'm not sure if people like seeing the sausage making. I've done Frankenblog just so that people who are interested in getting into blogging can do that, can see kind of what I'm doing. Because honestly, I feel like blogging and just learning in public is just a great way to inspire people and to meet new people and to kind of interact with the community. So but usually I will say this about blogging, and this is another advice. It's not necessarily a hard rule, but I do find most of my readers will come to my site organically through content search. And something as unique as Frankenblog, like my approach, is normally not something somebody would be typing into, say, Bing or Google or any one of those search engines. So
can you what exactly are we running here in this window? So this is at localhost 4000.
Mm-hmm. So if I go back in here, we're just running Jekyll's server. So you can see the command that we actually executed. But you can also, let me see if I can up it. You can also see all these additional flags that you need to pass in. So
I love taking being in the position of admitting when I don't know something, but I have no idea. See, I have never touched Jekyll. I thought Jekyll was like like something that you pointed at a directory full of Markdown and it generated like a directory full of HTML. So there's you're telling me there's a server component to it.
Sometimes, your original assessment is not wrong. It's actually pretty accurate, but during the writing process, there is a Jekyll server that you can run just to kind of make sure you're doing things correctly. You talked about that folder with Jekyll. Here is the static folder. So you could take this and deploy it into, say, Azure Static Web Apps, just as these files, and everything will be good to go. So here's the output of our index page. It's just HTML, like you were talking about. But yeah, this is the markdown that gets generated. But the reason I ended up writing this particular server command is so that individuals like yourself who maybe aren't familiar with Jekyll don't have to go research all these extra additional flags. So here I've set the host to localhost so that you can actually serve some of the static assets like JavaScript files, images, that kind of thing. I've also included flags for drafts and future. We'll go back to the command, the new command, but this is just in case you're writing content into the future and you actually want to see it show up in the final rendered output. Depending on your build, you might not actually pass these because you'll run a cron job or something like that that will build your static site, say, daily, right, to publish content. And then finally, these last two flags, if I was to change something, you'll see the terminal output update. So if we were to go back, you can see that it just automatically shows up. So that's my workflow. But to be honest, so let's say I'm hit with a bout of inspiration and I want to write another blog post, even in a day. Well, I don't want to publish content on top of each other. We've kind of established that you want to let your blog posts breathe a little between each other. So I've actually built that into the new command. So I come in here and say, I'm talking about ASP.NET Core minimal APIs, right? So that's my next blog post. And what you can see is it incremented the day past this one. So there's an incrementation from here. If we come back in here and we say talking about Entity Framework Core, we should see that the dates skip again. So I know David was talking about his approach to blogging and feeling kind of stressed a little, trying to keep this backlog filled, right? And trying to manage when things should release. I found this approach really helped me think about writing content in a way that maybe wasn't evergreen, but in a way it would at least stand the test of time. So instead of having to write content in a reactionary way to what's happening in the .NET community, focusing on solving problems people are having and knowing that not only are they having the problem today, but are likely to have the same problem months from now, made it easier for me to just write solutions rather than trying to answer a question that people are going to forget about in a month anyways, right? I don't know if that makes does that make any sense?
No, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of liberating once you kind of realize like you can write that way, and it's still people still find your content valuable and relevant to what they're doing. You realize again you can kind of detach from the concept of being a thought leader and just help people.
Right. So do you ever forget that you wrote about something and then it gets published and you can start getting pings on Twitter and you're like, why are you asking me about, ASP.NET Web API? Oh, that's right, I wrote about that.
All the time. So just yesterday, I think Particular Software, makers of like NService Bus, tweeted a post that recently got published about source generators and iSyntax receiver. And when I read the title of my blog post, I was like, I don't remember being this smart. It's like maybe I should read this blog post just to remember that I had this knowledge at one point.
I've had those moments. It's not usually something that I have looked at my own documentation and went, what?
Yeah, it's also surprising for me. It's like I know a lot of bloggers run into this as well. It's like it's surprising how often you run into the same problems that you run into, right? Whether it's because you're working within a particular domain or with a particular framework, and your brain just subconsciously wants to constantly do the same thing, that you end up running into the same problems. I found blogging those solutions, I end up finding my own previous solution. And not only that, as the language and the framework evolves, like we're going into .NET 6, it also gives me a great opportunity to go back to those blog posts and update them with newer, fresher content so that I can kind of help myself even further when I run into it, 6 months from now again.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot where bloggers actually blog kind of selfishly, like for themselves, where it's like they'll, months later, they'll Google it and they'll find their own blog and they'll be, oh, I had the answer at one point.
Yeah, I've heard Hanselman say it a few times that he only blogs so he can Google for the solution later.
Yeah, it's surprising. It's like it's totally a Back to the Future moment or a Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure moment where I don't know if you remember that scene where they're in prison and they're like, well, if we had a time machine, we'd put the key to the prison cell down here, right? It's very much like that. So, yeah, and that's basically Frankenblogging. I think the neat part of it is it's like these commands are really powerful.
They are. Oh, so I was going to ask real quick. So. Frankenblogging. So we've got Jekyll, we've got .NET. What are some of the other things that make up Frankenstein in this sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like the hosting model as well, right? Like when we talk about static sites, the true definition for me is like, if you can put it in a CDN and you can serve it, that to me is like a static site because it almost becomes dependent completely on the client's ability to parse those static files. So there's no more, there's no back-end consideration anymore. And for me, the thing I love about static sites really is the chess game, is knowing how to plan your content, your site, your user experience in advance so that you can deliver the best experience. And I think it's a fun and challenging problem for software developers to solve. And I think that is the part where it makes me feel like that Frankenstein mad scientist, right? You have to plan all those things in advance. So
I'm curious too. I wanted to ask, like, this infrastructure seems as though it's very mature. You've been doing it for a while. So I'm curious the amount of effort, and how long you've been kind of building out this internal infrastructure for blogging like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like an ongoing effort. I will say the commands in my personal blog have like evolved a little bit past what I have here. And I'm constantly thinking about other commands that I can add that would improve my reach as a blogger. One of the commands that I've been playing around with, let me see if I can, let's go to my blog. By the way, I have so many domains. By the way, this is the, this is the, like finding class declarations and source generators. Like, oh, wow. I don't remember writing that one, but, so one of the things that I've actually you'll notice right away is I have these open graph images, right? To me, these are very important, especially when you're kind of promoting content on social networks like Twitter or Facebook. And these use open graph. Let me see. And one of the commands that I've been thinking about adding and helping people is a command that will actually iterate through all your content and generate these thumbnails. And I actually have a blog post about taking images and taking, an array of items and actually generating these thumbnails. And if we scroll to the bottom, you can kind of see what the actual thumbnails look like eventually.
Yeah,
So,
I could see maybe like in your workflow having like a metadata field in your markdown that like points to like a URL of an image that says this is what I want for my thumbnail, and then your commands generate it.
yeah, I mean, right now for my blog, it's very manual because maybe the layout of my blog thumbnails aren't like, like words get out of hand in .NET super fast. Like system.text.json, that's like one big string, and solving for that placement sometimes can get kind of annoying. But this current layout, I still do manually. I hate to admit it, but if I was to move,
it's okay. The thumbnails for this show we do manually. We actually did the thumbnails for this show in PowerPoint, and I know like John Galloway and James and the other streamers here at Microsoft. They use they have like a thing that they type in text and it generates a thumbnail like this, and we just haven't ever made that leap because it's so much easier to format in PowerPoint.
Yeah, it really depends on like the brand or the styling that you go for, but I could see if somebody adopted something that's a little simpler like this. You could add that as a command. And I think one of the amazing advancements, I think, in the last 5 years is just how good CI and CD tools have gotten. And .NET's ability to actually work within those environments, I think, is like a great boon to the .NET community. So yeah, you can run these .NET commands not only on your local machine during a development, during your development or writing experience, but you could run these as CI/CD processes that can kick off things.
Just don't do .NET Watch in your CI/CD, right?
You know what? Here, let's go to my actual blog because I think this is important to kind of.
Well, and I'm hoping it leads into an answer to a question that I've had now for a few minutes. So you've shown us your workflow, like how you write and how you set when it's going to publish. Where does it get from your desktop up to the web? Like what's that process? Are you checking markdown files into a GitHub repo, and what's going on there?
Yeah, so I have this GitHub repo that's just my blog. And yeah, I just push content up here. So you can see that in this directory, we have posts. And they're just the markdown files that we were looking at locally on my machine. If you go back here, you can actually see all the GitHub workflows that I have. So one of them actually is to scan my entire site and push that content up to Algolia, which is a full text search provider. And you actually saw it in action back on my site. That's how we found that one blog post. The other workflow here is just, this is my Netlify Web Hook. So instead of trying to publish content every time I push stuff to GitHub, I actually just have it deploy every day. And that gives me kind of like a release cycle, right? Like, so every day, if there's a new piece of content that's supposed to be published that day, it will just automatically get published, right? So,
but I suppose you could, I guess, conceivably wire it up to do it on a successful build, though.
Yeah, I think Netlify by default will take pull requests and deploy them as like a preview site, which is also very nice. But yeah, here's my promotion workflow. So you can see we're using GitHub, or I'm using Git. There's no we, it's just me.
The royal we.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of The Big Lebowski.
Yeah. But yeah, so this just runs on a schedule. You can see there's some cron here. And yeah, it just takes these repository secrets and it runs this .NET command of promote, which will actually, we saw the code for that, which will just find a element from our RSS feed and tweet about it and promote it. So
I guess, yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about like the end to end, and it seems to me like really kind of what you've done is you've made a blogging engine, right? It's not that shifts the burden of the computation and the rendering and all that, shifts it up front to build time, as opposed to like, your run of the mill CMS or like, DOSBlog or whatever that is rendering stuff at the time of at runtime when people are requesting the resources. You're building them ahead of time, so you can just put them like wherever. It doesn't have to be. You said you're using Netlify, but it could be GitHub static pages, Azure static web pages. It could be just like wherever.
Yeah, and to me, I think this is kind of again, to David's point, this is kind of where the Frankenblogging comes into play, which is you can really mix and match these technologies. And the exciting part about where .NET is today is .NET can play a starring role in your solution, or it can play a team role. And in this case, it's, it's playing backup to the process that I've built. So it's helping create, those markdown files that Jekyll is expecting. It's looking at my directory to tell me what posts I've written and what the future holds for me. .NET runs in GitHub Actions, so it can like promote my content or send out tweets. So this is kind of the fun part of working with modern .NET for me. It's like you can really mix and match it, and you can take a lot of strengths from other communities and kind of build this process for yourself.
What I found interesting, so for my personal blog, I use Hugo rather than Jekyll. I'm not wrapping anything with the .NET CLI. When I started mine, I had migrated from WordPress, and I don't even think the .NET CLI existed then. So, but I'm curious, have you ever considered creating a NuGet package for this that might initially, kind of wrap Jekyll, but then expand it and, provide options like here's the different ways that you can do static sites. So you can use Jekyll or Hugo or insert whatever else is there to, generate it, and but just, providing your Spectre Council work that you've done with the scheduling capabilities and stuff like that. I think this can be really helpful for the community, and especially for other people who are wanting to get into blogging. Sometimes it can be tedious or, burdensome to even think about considering such a thing, right? Like people start off most often with WordPress, or how many websites have you gone to where it's like, here's, I've started my blog site, and then there's no actual post because like that's the work they've done, right?
That's every blog I've ever started.
Right.
Yeah, it's the I'm going to start blogging manifesto, and then nothing, no other blog posts. To your point, I did think about making this a NuGet package, but then I think I came to the realization that blogging is such a personal, there's so many personal decisions that need to be made about like how to blog and what to blog, and like kind of a focus of what you want to do as an individual. That I think the framework is what's important. Some of these commands are reshareable in a sense. But like you mentioned, you use Hugo, which is kind of similar to Jekyll, but has kind of its idiosyncrasies, a few differences. So, you can take a lot of these commands, but you really should make them your own as a blogger, right? And take advantage of those things. I think I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it would be really hard to make this a NuGet package in a way that helps individuals express themselves through the art. I'll call myself an artist, but through the art of blogging, I think it would be difficult to do that. But I'd be happy for people to try if the code's open source. It's MIT, and it's definitely an approach that worked for me.
Well, speaking of that, can you show us where we can find this and how we can get started?
Yeah. So let's go to I think it's Frankenblog. So if you don't know how to spell my name, you probably should take a screenshot. But you folks will probably put a link to this below, right? Once this video is published. But if you go to Khalid Abuhakmeh Frankenblog, you can actually clone this repository or fork it, and then you'll have your own particular version to start from. And you'll get the commands, you'll get the posts, and you can kind of just start tweaking there. This project also has a CS proj, so if you want to open it in Visual Studio or Writer or VS Code, you can do that, and this stuff will actually be a .NET project as well. So the only things you need are .NET 5 and Ruby installed, and you'll just need to run these commands.
So and Ruby is a dependency, I'm guessing, for Jekyll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Ruby, again, was developed at GitHub, and GitHub is mostly run on Ruby. So
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm, I think so. I don't think I'm talking out of turn here, but most of GitHub actually runs on Ruby, I believe. And the original founders of GitHub created Jekyll out of a need to have a static site generator. So.
Yeah, I see. And the Fuel Snabled is coming. Isn't Ruby older than GitHub? I was thinking it might be, because I can remember like back in 2007, I was messing around with a web application testing thing that ran Internet Explorer on a thread. It was called Web Application Testing in Ruby, Water. No, I mean, and not even to belabor the point. I mean, it doesn't matter whether Ruby is older than GitHub or not, but it's just like, wow, that's Ruby was not expected for me in this stack.
Yeah, it's. I will say I'm probably old enough, and I don't want to call you too out, but you're probably you're probably old enough to remember when Ruby was just a complete pain in the butt to install on Windows. I'm sure you don't remember exactly what you were doing with water, but you probably like have some phantom scars from trying to install Ruby on Windows.
Probably.
But installing Ruby on Windows these days is very, very easy. Ruby does come installed by default on Mac OS, although you might need to upgrade it. And it might actually even be installed on Linux as well. So this solution should work cross-platform regardless of what operating system you've decided to use. And yeah, like this is kind of a good starting point. Anybody who's really interested into getting into blogging, there's a lot here. And this isn't just something that I've thought up and, thrown over the wall. This is something I use every week. So this approach has kind of been tested.
Yeah, I can tell that it's been refined and polished quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're coming down to the end of our time box, is there any other information you want to share with our viewers about Frankenblogging or about what you're working with over at JetBrains or anything like that?
Yeah, I guess the only thing is, like check this out if you've ever been interested in blogging. Definitely download it, try out these .NET run commands, and actually even play around with them. Like look into the code, tweak them, see if there's other commands you'd like to add. I do have, I am on Twitter. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, feel free to follow me. It's at Abuhakmeh. It's kind of a joke of my last name, Abuhakmeh, but I'm usually on there. I'm helping .NET developers, not only with blogging, but with other things as well. From a JetBrains perspective, we just released a new version of Writer and ReSharper. So if you're interested in that, head over to the jetbrains.com site to check those new releases out.
Awesome.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't have anything else. So thank you.
Great. Well, tell my dear friend Rachel hello. And thanks again for saving my life in Cheesecake Factory all those years ago. And and thank you to our viewers for hanging out with us. This has been the .NET Doc Show. Check out show recordings, upcoming topics, and more at .NETDocs.dev. Tune in next week when we will have Gerald. I'm sorry, Gerald, I am not going to butcher your last name. I'll let you do that for me next week. But he will be joining the show to talk about Xamarin Community Toolkit. See everybody then, and thanks for viewing. Bye. And I don't actually have the outro video, so we're just going to end awkwardly this week, and I'll fix it next week. Thanks for viewing, everybody. Bye.